solid verbal. And now, Dan and Ty.
Dan Rubenstein, what a Saturday it was.
Yes.
The college football season is now officially in the books, at least the regular/conference championship part of the season. There were 9 games this weekend. We're going to talk through at least a little bit about all of them and a lot more about some of them, because boy, did we have some interesting things go down today. Thank you to one and all for tuning in. We're going to do our part over the next hour or so to unpack all of this, what it means, how we feel. There is a lot to sink our teeth into as we have conference champions abound. Please hit follow. Please hit subscribe. Don't forget, we're going to be doing a full run through of all of the playoff field, the seedings, the decisions that the committee made tomorrow. Or as I should say, many of you are listening to this on Sunday.
Okay.
Technically, it is Sunday as we are recording this.
Yeah.
5 p.m. Eastern time live on the YouTube channel, and then shortly thereafter on the audio feed, sir. We just got off the horn after doing a 4-hour stream. We thought we were only going to be talking about the Ohio State-Indiana game, but as it were, we had overtime in the ACC game as well. We had big happenings in the SEC game earlier in the day. The same could be said for the Big 12 game that took place at noon Eastern time as well. So my voice is dead, but I'm going to power through here, man, because we got a lot to discuss.
Man, you didn't even mention what? Montana State over Yale, Illinois State over North Dakota State in a huge upset. Man, what are we talking about here? We had all sorts of games. Villanova, somehow, some way, on the road against Lehigh. Let's start with the Big Ten.
13-10 was your final score. Ohio State came into this game about a 4.5 point favorite, depending where you look. They were still, I think, the choice by many folks who look at this game. And when you were, I guess, forced to make a decision, we all said Ohio State, Dan. Everybody thought Indiana was good.
I did, you did, but yes.
We all thought Indiana was good, but this is Ohio State we were talking about here.
Yeah.
Indiana won this game. This was a defensive battle. Really, the story of the day for me across the board was how 4 defenses fared. I guess in this case, we had 2. 13-10 was well under whatever under it was. I think it was like 45.5 points. And I think we learned a lot about the Indiana Hoosiers in this one, Dan.
Yeah, we absolutely did. Well, we did and we didn't, right? This is who Indiana has been this season. They've had a couple close calls, namely against Iowa, Oregon, and Penn State. They were able to come through in those close calls. The thing that those 3 teams had in common was defense, and Ohio State certainly has that defense. But I don't know how you come away from that game thinking anything but Indiana is just excellent. Like, we saw this Indiana, not this Indiana team, but we saw Indiana last year against Ohio State. We didn't know what to believe with their schedule. Obviously, Indiana more tested this season. But for them to come through, for them to force that much discomfort from Julian Sayin, from this offense, and Ohio State fans are quick to look at Brian Hartline and the play calling, and I'm sure there is, justifiable criticisms here. But you got to win between the hashes. Like, you got to win. And I watch Indiana. They won more one-on-one battles. They didn't back down from any of these dudes on either side of the ball. Fernando Mendoza with a couple of just monstrous, like Pedro Serrano marbles throws.
Yeah.
Just absolutely. I think it was, were they both to Charlie Becker? I want to say they were both to Charlie Becker.
Charlie B from Nashville, Tennessee, as Gus Johnson called him. Yeah, he had a monster game.
Omar Cooper on the sideline, hurt early on after he comes up a little bit gnarly after a long pass attempt. Look, the headline here for me is Indiana was better at moments. Indiana was better at the big picture, and Indiana was better at chaos. And at least for a night in Indianapolis, it was enough. It was just crazy impressive.
Joel Klatt brought up something very interesting on the broadcast, and we talked about this in the run-up to the game. Indiana was the most zone-heavy defense in all of college football.
Mm-hmm.
And at least in theory, coming into this one, you and I discussed how it makes sense to do that against Ohio State. You can't man these guys up. You're not going to man up Jeremiah Smith. Indiana tried a couple times, didn't really work out that well.
Right.
Hasn't worked out well for literally everybody who has tried it. And
even when it worked out, he made plays.
Even when it works out, he makes plays. And if it's
Yeah.
not him, it's Carnell Tate. If it's not him, it's Max Clare. It's Brandon Innes. I mean, they just keep coming at you with their pass catchers. And so Indiana, just by the nature of how they like to play defense, they were, I'm not going to say at an advantage, but that is the preferred way to play a receiver room that is this good and presents such a matchup disadvantage. But what Joel Klatt brought up on the broadcast was something that he was seeing throughout the course of this game. Indiana playing two safeties deep, almost extra deep to prevent against anything over the top.
Mhm.
Indiana dropping their linebackers a little bit deeper, maybe than you might expect. Forcing Julian Sain to take a lot of underneath stuff. And I think you saw that a little bit more later on in the game. I mean, they had some big gainers. Jeremiah Smith had a nice 52-yarder in this game. I think all of their receivers probably had a 20-yard gain here or there. Certainly Max Clare and Carnell Tate were in that class. But by forcing them to take a lot of the underneath stuff, it sort of defanged the offense a little bit. And Bo Jackson had a nice day on the ground, and I think in the end, Julian Sain finished with over 250 yards passing, and still, push came to shove, you would take the type of day that Julian Sain had. But Indiana was able to play enough smart defense against this passing offense to prevent themselves from being absolutely gashed. And they held them to 10 points. I mean, the proof is in the pudding. So I was damn impressed with this Indiana defense and their game plan coming into this one. We had some questions about the Ohio State offense. I think we still feel generally pretty good about what they have. They've got an accurate passer and
about what they have.
A developing running back, obviously an incredible cast of characters out wide that can kill you in 1,000 different directions. But the way that Indiana game planned here, it was very apparent that they were out for blood and that they wanted to try and win this one. And as you brought up on the stream that we did, the very long 4-hour stream, if you had told an Indiana fan 15 years ago that they would win the Big Ten, that fan would ask you, who was the starting five?
Exactly. Yeah. No, look, let's be as clear as we can be. Ohio State had opportunities to win this game. There was a missed field goal and a sneak that came up short, both in the red zone. And you know, both of these quarterbacks threw interceptions. There were opportunities in each way. There were explosion plays in each way. But it was especially coming out in that second half when Ohio State had the ball that Indiana's pass rush stepped up. They have the long pass. They turn it into points. And to me, the story is still the Indiana defense and how good they were on third downs for the first 2/3 of this game. Like they just kept Ohio State away from rhythm. And if you watch, the second half of that Michigan game when Ohio State just sat on the ball when they were just like, let's just turn 6 yards, 11 yards, 4 yards, 15 yards, right? That they sat on the ball for as long as they did. They got into a rhythm. There was no such rhythm to this Ohio State offense. And that's in large part due to the Indiana defense, what they were up front. And I know there are complaints about calls, non-calls, whatever, but
they didn't call it either way.
They didn't seem to call a lot either way.
No.
And you can't say Ohio State didn't have opportunities because they absolutely did. Indiana just converted more of their own. And so a crazy story we joked about, talking about the Indiana-Illinois game, deciding who would come in fourth place between like Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, and then who. Indiana's your Big Ten champ, and they went through Oregon and Indiana, and Ohio State and Penn State to do so. Just monsters.
Incredible.
Yeah.
I would bring up a few other points. You mentioned third down on the Ohio State side of what Indiana's defense did, but there was a big chunk of this game, and we talked about this too as we were watching it, that Indiana seemed very content to get to third and manageable. It wasn't about trying to take the lid off of the defense on first or second down, but they were just very efficient for a good chunk of this game at getting to third and short and converting. They finished 6 of 13 on third downs. That's pretty good. You'll take that against Ohio State.
Yeah.
I think that's a big part of why they had success in this one. And obviously Fernando Mendoza came up big again when he had to. I mean, I don't know if he won the Heisman with this performance, but he certainly didn't lose his invite to New York with this performance.
Right.
He should be there. He should be one of the finalists. Absolutely. And this is another clutch performance by him. We saw it on the road against Penn State. We saw it again here today against Ohio State, coming through in a really, really big way, making some key throws at big moments and just being really solid with the football. Did have the pick, but really, really solid across the board, not doing anything to make his team have to play from behind,
Yeah.
in a key moment. The other thing that I would add here, and I think this is very, very important, especially now as we go into the playoff. You know this as well as I. Everybody who is listening to this knows how this works this time of year. The conversation is about strength of schedule. The conversation is about resume. Who did you beat? The conversation often is this team a fluke?
Right.
I don't think you watch this game with Indiana winning 13-10 and in good faith could say that this was a fluke.
Right.
This was not a fluke win. This was a hard-fought win, and it was a defensive struggle. And for sure, it could have gone the other way.
Mm-hmm.
But even Ohio State fans can't look at this loss and say they got lucky. They were just damn good.
Yeah.
And so now as we go into the playoff, they are going to be the number 1 overall seed, which is still crazy to say aloud, but it's true.
Yep.
And it's undisputed. They're the only undefeated team in FBS college football. I got to raise my glass to Curt Cignetti, to Fernando Mendoza, to the roster that he built, which was better this year than it was a year ago. This team stood on the shoulders of what Cignetti did in year 1. And it's crazy, but they are the Big Ten friggin' champions with the 13-10 win in Indianapolis over Ohio State.
This is true. They left no doubt.
What would you do if you were the committee with respect to Ohio State? I think we'd agree that Indiana is going to be 1 overall. But does Ohio State drop at all? They were previously 1. Do you drop them to 2? Do you drop them to 3? This is obviously a very, very close win. I could tell you my inclination is to just switch places, 1 and 2 still. But
right.
Do you have a differing opinion?
I think I'm fine with Ohio State at 2. No, certainly no lower than 3, but I think I'd be fine with them at 2. Yeah. I mean, you go 12-0 during the regular season in a major conference, have a headline non-conference win like Ohio State does over Texas in week 1. You beat Michigan in the manner in which they beat Michigan. They lose the conference championship game by a field goal. Yeah, I think 2 is fine by me.
The other big game among many big games making headlines on Saturday was what Georgia did to Alabama.
Yeah.
28-7 was your final score. I was in disbelief watching this game for a good chunk of the way. And you know me, I mean, I am openly biased about my fandom for Notre Dame. Mm-hmm. I have been since the very beginning when we started this thing back in 2008. I make that no secret. And people who listen know that. So for me, I am rooting for everybody around Notre Dame to lose. Just as a fan. I was rooting against BYU. I was rooting against Alabama. And I said to Mama H before this game, the best case scenario would be a BYU loss. Didn't care if it was by a lot or by a little, but just a BYU loss. Get them out of the way. Certainly didn't want them to win. That would have taken a spot away from ND. And I wanted Alabama to get blown out.
Right.
And I didn't think it was possible. It certainly was not likely. Alabama sort of got blown out by Georgia in this game, Dan.
They didn't sort of get blown out. They were blown out.
What happened?
The season's a living, breathing thing. Georgia's defense, that first month or so, was a problem for Georgia. And over the course of the season, the Georgia defense got better. Gunnar Stockton got better. They were able to figure out how to navigate with key injuries, right? They're down their center. They were down Colby Young in this one. They were down, Noah Thomas in this one as well. They're able to figure out their depth. They're able to bring in guys like Chauncey Bowens for bigger and bigger roles. And their defense grew over the course of the season. All at the same time, Alabama looked like a team that struggled to put away Auburn. Alabama looked like a team that struggled to put away or got lucky to beat South Carolina. Alabama looked like a team that wasn't in command week to week like they seemed like they would be after at least their win against Georgia early, even though it wasn't a great second half in that game offensively. And they just could not find a rhythm, whether it was the running game, whether it was Ryan Williams disappearing, or at least Ryan Williams was abandoned in the passing game. Ryan Grubb never got in a really good rhythm with this offense. Ty Simpson looked like he was in disarray as he was trying to figure out the lack of protection in front of him against Georgia. Georgia was stronger. They sat on them in the second half in that very Georgia way once they get that lead and just converting 3rd and 4s after 3rd and 4s. Georgia just had a plan for everything, had the speed, had the aggression, had the confidence, and had the know-how to look at this Alabama team and say, I don't know, we just have this. I don't know. We can make the plays in special teams. Zachariah Branch had that big, it was a punt return, I believe, to set up really nice field position. They intercepted Ty Simpson. They weren't afraid of Ty Simpson. We made that joke, the Home Alone joke, like, I'm not afraid anymore. They just weren't afraid of him at all, it seemed. They played with kind of a very specific violent abandon that suited them super well. And Georgia just kept growing throughout the season, and it showed in this one.
I mentioned this on Thursday when we talked about this game. And shout out again to our friends over at Game on Paper for the job that they do with kind of chronicling these stats as the games are going on. But if you go back and look at the first time these teams played, all of the most important plays, the plays, let's say, that swung win probability the most, 8 of those 10 plays were on the Georgia side. So Georgia was doing very significant things that first time around, and obviously they only lost by 3 points. And there were definitely some plays they wish they would have had back. This looked like a team that knew that. A team that knew that they were close, that they felt like they were in a good spot, especially as they've developed now over the last month, 2 months of the season. And they came out there, they blocked a punt, first quarter, got a touchdown. Mm-hmm. Then they got an interception. They take a 14-zip lead into half. They go up 21-0 right away in the second half. And suddenly we're all talking online like, does this change the way that we view the back end of the playoff? Does this change how we view the SEC? Does this change, more broadly speaking, how we view conference championship games? I mean, this really, truly calls a lot into question. Even Zach, our wonderful and incredibly talented short-form video editor, which, by the way, if anybody needs a guy, hit us up, solidverbal@gmail.com. I will give you Zach's info. He is the best. Zach's a Bama fan. He was even questioning the black sweatshirt of death.
Yeah.
Saying in our Slack, hey, can he change into a white hoodie, please? Yeah. To change the way purple, this thing is going.
blue. Yeah.
Any color other than the black.
Yeah.
It threw everything into a blender. Georgia dominated this game. They dominated this game. They held Alabama to 3 of 14 on third downs. Bama finished with -3 yards on the ground. And if you take out all the sack yardage, still just 26 yards on the ground. They have not been a good running team all year. They've been very one-dimensional. It was part of the reason why I like Georgia.
No Jam Miller, to be fair. No Jam Miller.
No Jam Miller, but they weren't a good running team for most of this season, Dan.
Right. Agree.
So Georgia just absolutely dominated this game. And I think raised a lot of questions now with what we do with Alabama. I was blown away by the effort we saw from the Dogs. I was left sort of shrugging and staring almost like hopelessly at my hands, trying to figure out what do we do with Alabama?
Yeah.
What do we do with Alabama now? What does the committee do with Alabama?
This is the conversation we're having now. You don't want to go through other games first? We're doing this?
Well, we're here. We're here. What would you do with Alabama?
I think I'd be fine with leaving them out. I understand that it's a disadvantage in this specific scenario this year to play in this game. But if we're going to have Woody Harrelson lecture us about the prestige and the honor and the unique nature of playing in the SEC championship game and how important and regal and how much of an event it is for the masters of this sport, that it's a privilege for Alabama to be in this game and have the opportunity to win the SEC, that it's a meaningful game. And Alabama didn't even come close. No. Alabama didn't score. They had 0 points until the fourth quarter. Is that correct? I'm fact-checking on that.
That's correct.
So they didn't get into the end zone.
Yeah.
And I just think, as much as the conference championship idea feels very old suddenly in the 12-team playoff era, the game happened. It wasn't Alabama's 10th SEC game. It was Alabama's 9th conference game. A lot of teams play 9 conference games. Some play 10 conference games if you end up in the Big 10 or the Big 12 championship game. Or you're like that weird ACC team in North Carolina who schedules, the Wake Forest, North Carolina game that's like technically not a conference game, but because you want to keep the, the game alive.
What a weird friggin' sport.
Right. No, it's very strange. But game happened. Conference championship participants who have lost have been docked in the rankings like SMU and Penn State and Texas were last season. They still ended up in the playoff. But because of the unique nature of this year's rankings, I think you dock Alabama, even a spot, 2 spots, whatever, for no showing in this game. We got a really funny comment, somebody saying like it was very savvy of Alabama to lose this game because they now have a win over the SEC champ on the road, beating Georgia and Athens. I thought that was excellent.
Yeah.
It's a tough case to make today after losing this game the way that they did, even with the, I think, rightfully viewed as a disadvantaged situation that Alabama's in, that they have to play this game. You're in here for a reason, and you don't back it up. And so because they lost that game to Florida State, because they lost today, if you take the totality of their resume and their schedule and how they've looked in the back half of the schedule, I'm not going to tell you at their best Alabama doesn't look like a playoff team. But if we're going to split hairs, if we're going to look at the margins, I think I'm okay not watching this offense anymore against playoff defenses. I don't know. It's a complete personal opinion. That's mine right now.
The committee is in an impossible situation with this.
For sure.
Because they have 2 things that are going on at the same time. And they have to pick one or the other. And there is no good choice. If you decide that you're going to penalize Alabama for playing in this game and for basically no showing in this game, being dominated in this game. They didn't look like a playoff team in this game. You're right to point out that last year you had a bunch of teams that lost conference championship games, and they didn't fall out of the playoff field altogether, but they all dropped a spot or 2.
They dropped. Yeah.
They all dropped a spot or 2. And so there's precedent for that. Again, we don't want to necessarily penalize teams too much for getting to and playing in an extra game, but there is plenty of precedent to say that, well, if you don't win, you still drop, and it does change the seeding a little bit.
Right.
If you do that, if you drop Alabama 2 spots, they're out of the playoff.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, they're number 9. Only the top 10 teams are going to get in from that college football playoff ranking. Yeah. So on one hand, you sort of invalidate conference championship games, which is not going to go over well. As I joked around online, like Greg Sankey goes into a darkness retreat if that's what goes on.
Did you see that Paul Feinbaum, super likable guy, everybody agrees,
Always.
That Paul Feinbaum said he was going to call for like a congressional investigation. Once again, super likable guy.
Right. Now, let's have the politicians fix everything because that usually works, right?
Yeah. That if Alabama weren't to get in. Like, there is that like element of like, how could you possibly have a postseason without Alabama football? And my answer would be like, I don't know, pretty easily, it seems. I think the world will keep on spinning without Alabama football in this playoff.
If you drop them 2 spots, you kind of invalidate conference championship games. And on the other hand, if you don't put both Notre Dame and Miami in, you are also invalidating the head-to-head tiebreaker.
Sure.
Right? Because the committee now has to pick between one or the other. I suppose they could try to split the difference, drop Alabama 1 spot, move Notre Dame or Miami, I don't know what they're going to do, up a spot, and then both Alabama and one of Notre Dame or Miami gets in. But again, that's not going to quell most of these arguments.
No.
I think you've got to pick one or the other in light of this performance, and I don't know which direction they're going to go. Personally, if it were me, I don't think they looked like a playoff team today. I thought that was a really bad showing. I don't
think they've looked like a playoff team lately.
Georgia dominated them through and through. The game could have been worse, and it wasn't. And if it were up to me, I would probably put Miami in ahead of Notre Dame. I'd put Notre Dame at 10, and sorry, Alabama, you're at 11.
Alabama also lost to the playoff team in a power conference with the clear worst offense in Oklahoma at home. Like, I just think there are a bunch of data points. If you're going to point to head-to-head with Miami and Notre Dame as an important factor of why Miami should be in over Notre Dame, I think you have to look at that week as well. In week 1, Florida State, who, by the way, has not run a road game since 2023, beating Alabama.
Crazy. Which is crazy, man.
So if week 1 is meaningful, as for how we evaluate these teams, which a lot of people are telling me it is, then fine. Then we have to have this data point for Florida State and Bama as well, and considering Alabama. I'm fine with it. I'm totally fine with it.
This is our knee-jerk reaction show. We were doing this late. We were doing this after streaming during these night games for 4.5 hours. By the time people listen to this, in some cases, the committee will have already given its field of 12.
Yeah.
Because again, this comes out at noon or 1 p.m. Eastern time on Sunday. We're going to be live one more time, 5 p.m. Eastern time, right here on the YouTube channel, as many of you are watching now, to react to all of these matchups and what the committee decided to do. But at least at time of recording, a little bleary-eyed and with a voice that sounds like I smoke 7 packs a day.
You sound great.
I kind of feel like Alabama deserves to be on the outside looking in after this.
We all saw it, right?
We saw it. We
all saw them overwhelmed. If the SEC and whatever, the Big Ten with the Big Ten, the ACC, if we're going to say these conference championship games are a meaningful enough thing that we are going to throw money behind it, if they're going to impact the rankings, it's going to be a championship thing. It's going to mean bonus money for all these coaches and everything. Like, if it's a meaningful thing to win the conference via a conference championship game, it has to mean something in a couple of different directions. Now, I don't think you knock Alabama dramatically. Like, I don't think you knock BYU dramatically. Like, you don't knock Virginia dramatically, whatever. Because it is an impressive thing to get to this game. But there has to be some, like, you can't just like, well, Alabama lost that game in embarrassing fashion, and they remain where they're ranked unchanged. Like,
I mean, let's put it this way. Yeah. They certainly won't be moving up, right? You can't, it's really tough to justify them holding.
Never say never. Nick Saban has a lot of phone numbers, Ty.
Yeah. Nick Saban was apparently filming Verbo commercials instead of watching the first Notre Dame Miami game.
That's what it seems like. Yeah.
Anyway, this is definitely going to be a flashpoint in the conversation, whether you agree or disagree. I think we can all agree that it will be very interesting to see which direction they go. I kind of see it as a binary choice. They're going to piss off a certain faction of the fan base, regardless of what they do. I mean, that's just part of the nature of the beast here. But man, for as many new things as we have put into this sport to try and fine tune it, be it the transfer portal, NIL, conference realignment, expanded playoff, a strength of record metric as part of the factors that determine the field. No matter what we try to do to make this sport less complicated and more straightforward, we keep coming up with these fringe cases like this that throw the whole thing in a blender, and it's crazy. So
yeah, and they'll change something, and they'll say, well, we're going to change this tiebreaker, we're going to change the way these teams are ranked, we're going to change how many conference championship get in, or whatever, and there's going to be a new set of unforeseen errors, and that's
crazy.
How we're gonna roll.
The game earlier in the day on Saturday was Texas Tech and BYU, a rematch of one that we saw earlier in the season. It was a game that felt an awfully lot like the first one.
Yeah.
Final was 34-7 Texas Tech over BYU. BYU came out a little bit more aggressive this time around. They started out this game on fire, a 14-play, 90-yard drive. They milked almost 7 minutes off the clock. They ended it with an LJ Martin touchdown. It was actually the first time a team scored on its opening drive all year against Texas Tech. So I'm watching this. I'm thinking, oh, man, Kalani Sitake staying. The boys are fired up. This is going to be a different thing altogether. But the deeper we got into it, the more and more it started to feel like momentum was just slowly building for Texas Tech.
Well, it was also like inflamed tissue slowly building in Bear Bachmeier's ankle. He couldn't move.
But at first,
I felt horrible. Like, it just, the guy has been the heartbeat of this offense with his ability to improvise as a freshman, his ability to run, the ability.
You're talking about Bear Bachmeier, not Baron Morton. Yeah.
Is that what I said?
You said Baron Morton.
Excuse me. Bear Bachmeier. So it's a double bear situation, like I mentioned earlier on in the season. Bear Bachmeier, and he screws up his ankle, and it's horrible, and he has been the ultimate playmaker for BYU this season. And as soon as he went down, he was unable to plant. He's unable to really put anything behind his throws. He's all sort of arming short throws. And I said to you, what was it at halftime? 13-7?
Yeah.
When it was like very clear that they weren't going to be able to do anything offensively through the air. I said, I don't know what the live line is, but Texas Tech's about to win this game by 27, 28 points. And they did. And this is not to take away a single thing from Ben Roberts, who just had magnets in his glove for wherever the ball was going to be.
Who also got hurt before he picked the ball off twice and almost a third.
Yeah.
Was the MVP of this game. Yeah.
look, the best thing in this game, and it wasn't particularly close, was the Texas Tech defense. They hounded BYU. BYU needed its A-plus game. They needed to be 183% of what they were in that first matchup, and they weren't. And that's okay, because Texas Tech's an incredible team, but once he, hurt his ankle pretty early on, it was pretty evident that Texas Tech was going to be able to change the complexion of this game pretty dramatically. They did so on defense, setting up short fields and to turnovers, and then things just opened up on offense for Texas Tech. An incredible year for the Red Raiders. They're going to be a top 4 seed. They're going to get a bye, and they acquitted themselves beyond what I'm sure even the most optimistic Texas Tech fan, in September could have ever imagined throughout this year. So congratulations.
And honestly, if you're a BYU fan, despite the fact that, at least from my vantage point, Texas Tech was slowly building that momentum, Texas Tech still had a hell of a time trying to get in the end zone.
That's true.
I mean, the BYU defense was, again, very good in the red zone. On the day, they forced 6 field goal attempts. And as you said, it was just 13-7 at halftime. Now, this one picked up steam in the second half. BYU had 4 second half turnovers. That gave Tech short fields. I know BYU has played from and won from behind a couple times so far this season, but it's just like the deeper we got into this one, I kept being left with the feeling that yes, but maybe not against Texas Tech.
Right.
Like, you need to show something other than what they showed for the vast majority of this game, as Bear Bachmeier, who was hurt, and that sucks, tried to stretch the field a little bit, tried to throw a little bit more downfield. They graduated to a point in this game where they couldn't settle for the dump offs, and they couldn't just run Bear Bachmeier because he was hurt. And LJ Martin wasn't doing enough on the ground to, give them a steady diet of the ground attack when they actually had to try and stretch this field. It just wasn't there.
Right.
And that was when this one started to come apart. I'm still not sure I'm enamored with the Texas Tech offense.
Yeah, I think it's good. I don't think it's amazing.
I feel like if you are a team like, let's say, Oregon, who in all likelihood will come away from this being the number 5 seed.
Right.
If you win your opening round game against, well, we'll talk about that in a second. But if you win that game in Eugene, next team up would be Texas Tech on a neutral site. I would really like that matchup if I were an Oregon fan.
I mean, I think the game might be in Jerry World again.
I know, but I would really like that matchup for Oregon.
Okay.
Given what I saw from the Texas Tech offense, which, by the way, like, Barrett Morton's solid. Barrett Morton's a veteran presence. I thought Barrett Morton was fine. Their ground game is sneaky good. People don't realize how good their backs are. Even after losing Quentin Cooley in the beginning of the year, the transfer, right? They're good. They're really good rushing the football. I am not fully enamored with this offense, but the defense is very solid.
Quentin
Joyner.
Yes. From USC. Very good. It's
late.
okay. You're good. Yeah, I don't know how much time we want to spend on a Texas Tech Oregon preview, but it should be a hell of a game if it comes to fruition. I hope we get a bunch of great games come like the New Year's and New Year's Eve time. The other thing, by the way, with BYU is they went 11-1 before this game.
Hey,
they're going to finish 11-2. If this were a straight 12-team ranked playoff, regardless of conference,
they're probably in.
I think you're probably including them.
You're probably in. And say what you want about whether Kalani Sitake may or may not have been a fit at Penn State.
Yeah.
Right? But this dude put together an 11-2 season with a true freshman quarterback who they didn't think was going to be the quarterback. It was a scramble drill to figure out who was going to lead the offense. There is no question in my mind that this dude deserved every freaking penny of that raise that he got. He is a hell of a football coach. And if there's going to be a new influx of cash for him, for NIL, for the assistant pool, all of that stuff, if you are a BYU fan, I do not think you are getting in the playoff, but I do think this could just be the tip of the iceberg because you got a really good coach. I think you got a really good quarterback. And if, in fact, they're going to pour a ton of resources into this program now, the future is very, very bright. So I'm excited about that for BYU fans. I'm excited to see what kind of matchup Texas Tech draws. And though I wish this game would have been a little bit closer, I came away mighty impressed with the Texas Tech defense. They were really solid in this game. And if they keep playing like that, it doesn't matter what the matchup is. They're going to be a damn hard out in the playoff.
Yep. I think they finished number 1 in points per drive allowed this season against FBS teams in non-garbage time drives. Just a suffocating defense.
Texas Tech wins the Big 12, which means our final Power 4 conference champion, Dan.
Nearly beat UConn. They nearly beat them.
Your champ is 8-5. The Duke Blue Devils.
Yeah.
Game went to overtime. We were on our stream talking through 13-10, Indiana knocking off Ohio State. And we both had on a second screen this Duke Virginia game. Virginia, to their credit, made a furious comeback to get this one at 20 all. A beautiful throw from Chandler Morris down the left sideline to give them the tying touchdown after the extra point. I mean, they fought like hell to get to the point where they could play this one in overtime.
Did the right thing and kicked the field goal quickly with like 3 and change minutes left to get it to 7. Yeah.
I mean, they did everything they could. They got just too late of a jump.
Yeah.
I was really impressed with Duke in this game. We could talk about what it means for Duke and what the postseason looks like for Duke, and I think that's a separate conversation. But this team, which has been laughed at for its lack of defense for most of the season, really held Virginia down. They really held Virginia down.
Until like the last 5 minutes.
Until the last 5 minutes, yeah.
Yeah.
They held Virginia down. And they looked damn good doing it. So I was impressed with that side of the Duke Blue Devils. This is not to say this is like a brick wall of a defense. It wasn't even that much of a shutdown effort, but their ability to come up big when they had to, their ability to win the turnover battle, their ability to kind of use that to win the time of possession battle, all of those things I think work together to put Duke in a position to win this game. And this is about as good as I have seen them all year. Yeah. I came away mighty impressed by just Manny Diaz getting his team ready to play in the manner that he did. It was always going to be a bit of an uphill climb to get to this point, and it required tiebreakers and a bunch of good luck. But the Duke Blue Devils, of all teams, end up emerging as your ACC champion. Crazy.
Yeah. A weird one, but yeah, you mentioned the Duke defense. Virginia wasn't even like that bad on third downs. It was, untimely turnovers and penalties. And it was a pretty good back and forth. Duke made more plays early on. Darian Mensah was good. Nate Shepard was largely very good. Cooper Barcade, who had a good year all year long, was good again. And it was coming up big in overtime with a play call that look, every play call is not going to be perfect with the trick play. It's the decision to throw into double coverage in that specific moment that I'm sure Chandler Morris would like back. There's nothing wrong with going for something weird and perhaps unexpected in overtime. It was a tough way to end it for Virginia, and good for Duke for sort of sticking with the assignments and making a play when it counted most.
This presents
8-5 Duke ACC champion.
This is something of a nightmare scenario for the playoff.
Yeah.
Especially if you are a power conference commissioner. Duke is probably not going to get in the playoff with 8-5.
No, they're not. They're not at all. It's not probably. They're not going to be in the playoff.
They're not going to be in the playoff.
And that's okay. They won in a different way with a different postseason coming.
Look, they'll take it, and they're going to go to a bowl, and this is obviously the cherry on top of a season that had its ups and downs. But in terms of the broader national conversation, for an 8-5 team to win the ACC, that paves the way for, I think, football hipsters around this great land of ours to rejoice, because it likely means we're going to get Tulane and James Madison in. 2 G5 teams in the playoff field this year, unless they do something crazy and decide they want to rank Duke ahead of JMU, which I can't imagine they would possibly do, but who knows with this committee.
That's true.
So I think that sets up your 5 and 6 seeds really well. If it does end up being, let's say, Oregon at the 5, Ole Miss at the 6, You'd be looking at maybe Oregon hosting JMU, maybe a rematch between Ole Miss and Tulane being played in Oxford. This is something that, honestly, we have been getting emails about. We wrote about it in our newsletter. We've tweeted about it sort of haphazardly. We've talked about it on occasion as we've talked through various playoff scenarios. This was always the one thing that could have happened that it was almost just something we would giggle at. Like, oh, wouldn't that be something? If an 8-5 team won and suddenly you have 2 G5 teams in, I don't know if it makes the playoff any better. It definitely gets some new teams exposure to the playoff.
Right.
But in terms of all the things that could go wrong, this was the one that seemed so distant that it couldn't even be possible.
Buddy, we could have a top 10 ACC team in the playoff and the ACC champion not even sniffing a possibility of getting into the playoff. It's great.
Duke Blue Devils, congratulations. You win. A tough pill to swallow for sure for Tony Elliott, for Chandler Morris, the Virginia Cavaliers. They had a great season. I mean, a great season. 10-3. They finished this thing up. I mean, far exceeding expectations. I think a lot to build on. So at least in that sense, a really, really good year and something to be happy and proud about. But obviously you would have liked to have gotten this one.
Sure.
It went to overtime. Duke scored. Virginia ends up throwing an interception. That was the ball game, 27-20.
Yes. And by the way, good for Duke, by the way. Both of these teams, Virginia spent in the portal, Duke spent in the portal, obviously most notably with Darian Mensah, Cooper Barkay. Like, these guys did really, really well. They came through Manny Diaz in year 2, winning the ACC. Now, look, the tiebreakers are the tiebreakers. And nobody's going to sit here and claim that they would, bet $1,000 on Duke against the spread against Miami or something, or straight up. But you can only win the games put in front of you. And Duke got this game put in front of them, and they won it. Awesome.
So with the power conferences out of the way, and given the results now, I think there's more than enough reason to talk through some of these games in the G5 level. And what it means, because I think in all likelihood we're going to get 2 of them in this playoff.
Yeah.
Which, again, is crazy. But the one that everybody expected was the winner of the American. They played this game on Friday night. It was Tulane 34, North Texas 21. North Texas had 5 turnovers, 3 interceptions, 2 fumbles. 2 of the interceptions were tipped. They also should have had a pick 6 off of Jake Retzlaff in the second half, but it went directly through a defender's hands and into a Tulane receiver's hands, which I got to say could not have summed up this game more from the North Texas perspective. There was just a lot that went wrong. I love Drew Mestemaker. I think he looks like he's potentially an NFL quarterback, and he's only a freshman.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he got the help in this game. He didn't get help from his line. No. There were plenty of instances where he didn't get help from his receivers. He was a very, very good player on a very, very good team, but he just did not get the support when he needed it.
No, and it was, aptly named. It was a wave of Tulane front 7 dudes in
that's right
every single lane, constantly in every single backfield moment. Like, they were just overwhelmed. They were overwhelmed by Tulane. It was 24-7 about halfway through. Like, they were playing from behind pretty much the whole time. I know they scored early, but Tulane just too many ways to win. Looks like a strong team. We'll see what that means for playoff caliber. Obviously, like, for what John Summerall did with the, not distraction, but the reality that he's taking a new job and coaching out this season for Tulane, for them to be as locked in as they were against North Texas is super impressive. But I also remember the way Tulane kind of faded last year, right? That they closed especially impressively this season. So really nice win for Tulane. Really unbelievable season for North Texas, as they themselves now have a coach who's moving on to another job. But very cool season in the American.
Yeah, nice win by Tulane, especially given the distractions. My guy, John Summerall, runs a little hot in the sidelines.
He does. Good.
There were a couple moments in this game he looked like he wanted to body slam an official, but kept it together long enough to get the win. The offense is very dependent on Jake Retzlaff, though. I mean, they're basically running the BYU offense with him.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a little bit of everything. Whatever works, they stick with it. It's very Aaron Roderick. Mm-hmm. But I think it's going to be interesting when we get into this playoff now, because the skill talent around him is definitely not as good as what he had a year ago at BYU. And if you're that dependent on one guy, if you're going up against a good defense, be it in Oregon, be it Texas A&M, Ole Miss, whoever, any of these teams in this field, really, they're going to be good enough to key in on that and probably make you even more one-dimensional or zero-dimensional. And that's not even a thing, but I think they could take away most of what Tulane wants to do. They are obviously going to be a G5 rep at this point. If you go off of last week's rankings, they would be traveling to Eugene for a first rounder against your Oregon Ducks. I don't want to be the wet blanket. I'm just going to say it's going to be a really tough matchup with whoever they play. Yep. Maybe the winner gets to keep Mekhi Hughes. I don't know what the deal's going to be with that.
If it is done in Eugene,
Oregon, Tulane, but either way, like if that ends up being the matchup, it's going to be a real tough one, and we could talk through it in due course. But kudos to Tulane for getting the job done. This is a nice win for them, especially given distractions. And the same is true for James Madison.
Yes.
So James Madison also in a similar position where their coach is leaving, Bob Chesney going to UCLA. This is a much closer game than I expected. It was 17-14 start of the fourth quarter. It was a defensive battle through and through. Collectively, these teams were 6 of 32 on third downs. So it was not a banner offensive showing for either side. Again, it was a defense that stood out. This is very much a weekend of defensive storylines. They had 8 sacks, 14 tackles for loss. If you include the sack yardage, Troy finished with negative 26 rushing yards. If you don't, they only had 20. So JMU really stepped up. And to that point, they won it on the ground. Bob Chesney likes to run. He likes to play a physical brand of football. They only had 93 passing yards, but they had 318 on the ground, including 220 of which came from our good friend Wayne Knight.
Hello, Newman.
Yes,
just like the other Wayne Knight, Dan, he is short, he is stout, he is annoying as hell. And if you're a James Madison fan, you love having him on your team because he's sort of a bowling ball with eyes.
Yes.
He had a really good game, 73-yard touchdown run in this one early on. Alonzo Barnett, like I said, not great through the air, but did enough on the ground, especially in the second half here, to get the win over Troy. Your final was 31-14, Dan. I guess we're going to see what the committee does on Sunday, but if you believe the rankings, unless there is some sort of magic trick that goes on at the 11th hour, I got to imagine that JMU is in as well.
Yeah, and look, there's a lot of people who are rightfully saying that, like, this is not necessarily the intent of finding a national champion and not having the 12, like, clear best teams or 12 of the, like, 14 best teams. And we have an argument over, 12, 13, 14, 15 or whatever, and talk about Vanderbilt and Texas. And that's the conversation we should be having. And that's all fine. There's a lot of tournaments with teams that don't have the best records, that don't have the best schedules. Like, we watch the NCAA tournament every year, and then there's a team who goes, I'm trying to do my math here, but like 14-18, but wins the CAA or something and ends up in the tournament. And they do a lot better than the team who won the regular season portion. And basketball is not football, but it's a tournament, and there are rules to the tournament. And then there's just weird years to tournaments. This is a weird year, and teams like Texas and Vanderbilt and BYU, teams who've had playoff caliber seasons at times, are left out. And we have JMU, we have Tulane, we have Duke winning the ACC. We're probably going to overreact as a sport, and it's probably going to lead to something new. But I think we just kind of have to live with it, even if those first round games are going to get like, I forget who it was last year. Was it Sean McDonough sort of opining during a broadcast about Indiana losing to Notre Dame the way that they did? That didn't age super well now, by the way, with Indiana now beating Ohio State a few months later to win the Big Ten. But I don't know. It's sports. That's what happens. All of these teams had control over their results. And sometimes you just get a weird field. And that's where we are.
I also don't think JMU looked the part of a playoff team. Like, I'm glad they're in. I think they belong in, given the letter of the law. It's not their fault. It isn't their fault. All you can do is win the games.
Yeah.
Yes, they left, I think, a bit to be desired. Their defense is solid. Their defense is good.
Oh, buddy, they flattened Troy.
I stand by what I said a couple of weeks ago, that at least on the defensive side, I'm interested to see what they can do against some better competition. But by virtue of circumstances, there's a pretty good chance we're going to be talking about JMU in there as likely a 12 seed squaring off against Oregon or whoever ends up being the 5.
Yeah.
Elsewhere around college football, 3 other games. We have Boise State winning the Mountain West for the 3rd straight year. It was never close. They won 38-21. They jumped out to a 21 zip lead in the first half. UNLV was playing from behind the entire game. They did get it close. They did pull to within 28-21 in the third quarter, but the Boise defense really locked them down in the fourth quarter.
Yes. There was a ton of blue, by the way, for the Boise passing game with Madison back.
Yes.
Looking into the UNLV secondary, he would just kind of see a safety peeking or kind of see a safety leaning one way, and he would just throw it. I was going to say to grass. It's not grass, but he would throw it to wide open blue turf where he knew a receiver would be, and thus was. And there was just chunk play after chunk play for Boise. UNLV is a defense that didn't give them any problem earlier in the season, and they played like they knew they wouldn't on Friday night and didn't.
Western Michigan won the MAC.
Yes.
23-13. They had 286 yards on the ground. Jalen Buckley was a dude. He had 193 and 2 scores on 19 carries. Miami struggled to move the ball. They had 2 different quarterbacks in this game. Their biggest issue was they just couldn't run. They only had 73 yards on 31 carries. So Western Michigan ends up winning this one in a game that I think final was 23-13. It really wasn't that close. It did not feel close at all because this was a dominant effort from Western Michigan. So congrats to the Broncos. And last but certainly not least, let's give a shout out to Kennesaw State, baby.
Oh, man. So cool.
Second year in FBS college football, they win 19-15, a good game from Amari Cooper. Passed for 246 and a touchdown. I am really excited.
Amari Odom.
Amari
Cooper would be a cool story.
It's late.
If he came back and played quarterback.
Is that mistake number 3 for me? I get 3 on a late night show.
Yeah, you're good.
I am really excited about this jump for Kennesaw State. This is season 2 after joining FBS. I am thrilled with what Jerry Mack did this year for the Owls. We talked about it in the preseason a little bit. There was a lot of controversy about moving on from their previous coach, going to Jerry Mack.
Yeah.
There was a lot to like about Jerry Mack. There were reasons, I think, to be excited about what he could do. The fact that they win Conference USA in 2025 is nuts.
Yes.
Even your rosiest of projections for Kennesaw State would not have them winning this conference. And I don't care if there were other teams across this conference that were decimated, either with coaches leaving or players leaving or whatever. But the fact that they got it together as quickly as they did and won is awesome. Awesome for them. So congratulations if you're a Kennesaw State Owl.
By the way, they acquitted themselves, Kennesaw State, acquitted themselves against Wake Forest in the exact same manner. They lost by 1. So did Georgia Tech beat Wake by 1. Virginia Tech lost by 7 to Wake. Kennesaw lost by 1. Oregon State lost by 25. Kennesaw lost by 1. SMU lost by 1 to Wake. Kennesaw lost by 1. Like, I don't know. It's just, sometimes you just got to be like, that's a cool thing that Kennesaw accomplished this year, turning it around and winning the conference in year 2 as an FBS team. We saw like the good new FBS teams, and I know Conference USA is a little bit different than it was a few years ago, but like Missouri State and Delaware, like all good stories.
Those are the 9 games that took place on championship week. Again, Dan and I are going to be back on Sunday at 5 p.m. Eastern time. We're going to do a live stream. We're going to record it. We'll post the audio for our podcast listeners, and we're going to talk through what this playoff field looks like. But not to put you too much on the spot,
right?
Just as like a natural transition to what we know we're going to have to talk about tomorrow. How would you see these teams in the playoff? I think let's assume that JMU is the 12 and Tulane is the 11.
Mm-hmm.
Rank the 10.
I would start number 10. I would go, I guess, Notre Dame. I'd go 9, Miami. I'd go 8. I need to pull the teams up, Ty. Who am I missing right? Oh, I guess 8, Oklahoma.
8 would be Oklahoma. Yeah.
8 would be Oklahoma. 7 would be A&M. 6 would be Ole Miss. 5 would be Oregon. 4 would be Texas Tech. 3 would be, I think they're going to bump Ohio State down, but I would put 3 Georgia, 2 Ohio State, 1 Indiana.
Yeah. I mean, I think maybe with the exception of a few differences.
I mean, I think it's weird to rank Miami behind Notre Dame for the past, 4 or 5 weeks and then like spring them up because they got closer.
I think that's what they're going to do. I really think that's what they're going to do. And there's also no guarantee that they're going to bump Alabama out completely. I mean, this committee has proven time and again that they don't always operate on the same logical plane as the rest of us. So I don't envy the position they're in. I think it's sort of an impossible choice every year when they have to do it. But I think if it were up to me, I would probably go in the similar direction. The question that I know we'll get from some in the Verballerhood is, well, what about BYU? And what about Texas? Or what about Vandy? What do we have to say about those three teams, Dan?
Vandy's a tough one because you lose to Texas and Alabama. And if I'm going to say Alabama's not in, I don't know how you make the case for Vandy in this moment, as impressive as they were. Like, I would just, from a pure entertainment standpoint, would love to have Diego Pavia in my playoff.
Yeah.
I just think there's just too much of a roadblock right now, not logistically, but logically. In terms of Texas, I've talked about this before. My thoughts: Texas can look like a playoff caliber team. They didn't do it often enough for me, both in their wins and their losses. I know, I'm not going to try to retread what we've spoken about before. They had a chance to have a huge win against Ohio State, didn't do it. And now, because there are consequences to losing a game, they're like, well, we don't want to face consequences anymore. We're not going to schedule big games. Like, okay, Texas, good luck. So I just don't have Texas there. They just didn't look like a high caliber team often enough. So I don't have them there with their 3 losses. Who else did you mention? BYU. We talked about BYU already.
Yeah.
I just think it was a bad year to have the record that they did. And when you look more closely at their games, specifically against Texas Tech, losing by a combined 50 is not a huge selling point when you're talking about very small margins between these teams. So that's why I don't have BYU there, that they had an opportunity to say, yes, I know we lost by 22 or whatever to Texas Tech a few weeks ago, but we've grown, we've changed, we've evolved since then, and let us prove it. And unfortunately for BYU, Bear Bachmeier and his health got in the way of being able to prove it. But even still, they couldn't do it. Like, Texas Tech was the clear better team once again. Injuries happen. Adjustments need to happen. Depth needs to be there. And it just wasn't for BYU. Takes nothing away from what was a really, really strong season, but I don't have them there.
I think in the case of BYU, in the case of Texas, in the case of Alabama, you get blown out against a top 10 team. In BYU's case, more than once. I think you got to take an extra hard look at that team's resume. And this is also true now of Alabama, even though it was in a conference championship game.
Right.
You lose that badly. Not every loss is the same.
Right.
And the committee has acknowledged as much. I think they have given Notre Dame a lot of credit for its close losses. Again, 2 really good losses by comparison by a combined 4 points. They have given them credit for that.
If you're going to give strength of record in Notre Dame, where the wins weren't super impressive opponent-wise, but they didn't win any by single digits. They blew everybody out, basically.
That's right. So if you're going to look at a loss, as apparently the committee is doing, and saying, well, a close loss is pretty good, and we will give you some credit, half credit for that. I think if you're going to apply that logic to a close loss, you also have to look at a blowout loss against some of these teams and use that as a measuring stick to determine, is this team up to snuff when it comes to making that playoff field. And I think there's probably a case to be made that it disqualifies some of those teams that find themselves in that situation. Vandy's a tough one. Vandy's very much a tough one. And I will admit, just from an entertainment standpoint, having Diego Pavia in the playoff will be damn fun. I think they're going to be on the outside looking in. But at the end of the day, this is still a really, really solid team that has a lot to be excited about now that they're flipping top quarterback recruits. They got Clark Lee signed to a longer-term extension. He's not going anywhere. I mean, the future is very, very bright for this program. I just think it's, not playing a game this week. And I know they maybe tried to play something of an exhibition game this week. Not having that extra game probably hurt them, about as much as anybody.
It is a weird thing, right? That I know that, right? It's hard to look at the committee and say this is who they are and this is what they believe and this is how they're gonna, this is what history tells us what they're gonna react to and not react to. Miami was 12 how many days ago? 4 days ago?
Yeah.
Miami was 12. They found Miami's 10-2 season to be less impressive given Miami's wins and losses, the manner in which they did so, who they played. They found it to be less impressive than BYU at 11-1. BYU had to play in a game against a more difficult team than arguably Miami has faced all season long and lost. Miami didn't have to play, having gone 10-2 in a weaker conference. In my opinion, the ACC is weaker than the Big 12 this season. I don't know if the numbers bear that out. You might have a better idea than I do. I don't think the ACC was all that strong in the upper half this year with how a couple of different teams collapsed.
Right.
And Miami's going to jump BYU.
Right.
Based on what exactly? Like, those are the things to me, like, I'm trying to understand an understandable phenomenon. That's not a word I understand. But, like, that's one of those things where it's just like, you put somebody up from the committee on a stage with a microphone, you're like, what did Miami do this week in a way that impressed you enough to have them jump BYU, who actually had to play in a conference championship? It's just one of those weird things. And there's, the logic can be applied to Alabama. I understand that as well. It's just, they paint themselves into a corner and then are going to have to get on TV and be like, so here's what we think now. And nobody's going to be happy.
Why don't we leave it there? Congratulations to all 9 of the conference champions. We've got a big day upcoming tomorrow where we're going to figure out what the rest of the postseason looks like. Again, I would encourage everybody, first off, if you made it this far, hit follow or subscribe so that you don't miss any of our episodes. Secondly, if you are going to be around on Sunday, and if you're interested in taking part of the live reaction that we're going to do, that'll be at 5 p.m. Eastern time. The rankings come out much earlier than that. We're going to give ourselves a chance to take it all in, let it marinate a little bit, put some thoughts together. We'll take your comments.
Yes.
We'll take some questions. We'll be as interactive as we can with it because I know this is a very big thing in the college football world and something that everybody looks forward to. So much, much more to come here. We still do at some point need to talk about some of the other coaching news that transpired, but we'll save that for the upcoming week because college football is never short on news, especially this time of year. So keep it right here. Again, follow or subscribe if you are ever so inclined. If you made it this far, if you enjoy what you're hearing, please consider leaving us a 5-star rating or a review or just dropping a comment wherever you can. We read all that stuff. We appreciate all that stuff. As I like to say, please be kind, but we would love to hear from you. We'd love to get your input.
You did neglect possibly the most important long-term thing that transpired today. And that is the Pinstripe Bowl is going to feature your national championship. We get Penn State, Clemson, Ty Hildebrand.
I said they'd be playing. I didn't say where they'd be playing, but
we get them. I almost feel like you have to sing the national anthem before that matchup. It's in your favorite baseball team stadium.
God.
Yankee fan Ty gets Penn State, Clemson, arguably the 2 most disappointing teams of the season, facing off in a baseball stadium, I assume in like 3 hours from the time we're recording this. And you called it with an asterisk.
With an asterisk.
Great.
We will talk to you guys before long. Thank you again for your ongoing support. All that's left now is the field of 12. We will go through that as soon as we can. For that guy, Dan Rubenstein, for myself, Ty Hildebrand. As always, thanks for hanging with us, for supporting what we do. We'll catch you on the flip side. Stay solid.
Peace.